4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see if we're going to start. I think we're about to start. I think we're about to get. Sound seems to be working, and we're pouring some water for the coffee. So we are on the live stream. Unlearn what you think you know about food. Let's start over. That's the hook for today. How's that? Are you ready to dive in with me after hearing that catchphrase? Or maybe you're thinking, oh, I don't know what this guy's going to talk about. I better move on. Stick around, because we're going to talk about something that is probably important to all of us to consider and think about in life, and that is health, fitness, and longevity. And we're going to talk about that as I make and drink my cup of morning coffee this morning. Friends, for those of you who are dropping by, thanks for dropping by. My name is Toby. I am 41 years old, and I train to live an active, self-sufficient, and adventurous life. I do so by minding my sleep. I try to sleep between 7 and 9 hours in a night. I do so by minding what I eat. I try to eat within my energy balance. We'll talk a bit more about that today. And I try to get some exercise in, at least 30 minutes of training every day, and about 2 hours of movement throughout the day, if at all possible. Beyond that, I'm also focused on making connections, contributing to communities that I'm a part of, and I am dedicated to developing skills and hobbies to keep my mind and body active and fit, not just in terms of fitness, but in terms of learning and ability, and to have a sense of accomplishment. All of those things related to health, fitness, and longevity. So if that's something you're interested in exploring, and you'd never thought about it that way, well, then this might be the podcast for you. You can usually follow my trainings and workouts live on live stream on my channel every morning for 30 minutes, or every day for 30 minutes. I alternate mobility days with strength or strength endurance days with kettlebell. And once a week or twice a week, I usually go running. And I usually go for about a 30 to 60 minute walk every morning as well on the days that I am not running. Right now I'm not doing that because I've injured my left foot. Seems to be a new thing every month. I don't know what's going on. The foot seems to be recovering well, but there isn't a workout or training to stream today because I am giving my foot some time to rest and recover. Probably sprained something in the middle of the foot while running or playing Saturday, and that just needs time to get better. So anyway, if you've dropped by here, go ahead, hit like, subscribe to my channel, and we can continue this conversation about health and fitness, and check out some of my videos. If you really want to help me out, I'm trying to reach that 3,000 minutes of watch time. I think the quickest and easiest way, if you've found your way to this podcast, is for you to actually just listen to a whole podcast. But if you want to go to my channel and check out some of my videos, that would also be greatly appreciated. Today's Tuesday. We're going to talk about food and nutrition, hence the hook about us needing to unlearn what we think we know about food. We need to start all over, especially when we're just starting out on a health and fitness journey. So let's put this into a good frame of reference, right? In the country where I live, which is the Netherlands, around Amsterdam, right? More than half the people are overweight. And that number is expected to rise to about 64% by 2050. That is a lot of people who are carrying a lot of excess weight, predominantly in form of fat, because not everybody in this country is tall, lean, and muscular, and that's why their BMI is skewed. And with that comes a whole slew of additional problems. Now, we face many different challenges in terms of our lifestyle, in terms of how much we can move, the food we have ability, how well we can sleep, the societal pressures that are enacted on us already from our teenage years into adulthood. There are a lot of things that we need to consider when it comes to health and fitness, and especially for longevity, because the truth is, despite all of this, we are getting older. But there's a 14-year gap between people from lower socioeconomic statuses, people from higher socioeconomic statuses. And as harsh and as cruel as that reality is, I think it merits calling out and discussing the fact that if you are not well off financially, and if you have more of a life that would be considered someone of a lower socioeconomic status or social status, you run the risk of being unhealthy because habits of poverty and habits, that's not the right way to put this, the ability to lift yourself out of poverty, the ability to change the habits that come with lack of financial means is incredibly difficult without aid, help, and a lot of good luck. So it's not impossible, but the facts are right now that you face severe challenges in benefiting from the advances society is making in terms of health and fitness. Despite the fact that we're getting older on average and in general, we're also getting more sick years towards the end of our life. My intention personally is to prevent that, is to get to my 70s and 80s as healthy and fit as I possibly can, understanding the limitations there, and we'll talk a bit more about that tomorrow when we talk about movement, health, and fitness. We're going to understanding the things that we can influence, our cardiovascular health, our strength and overall general conditioning, our mobility, the connections we have, the way we are embedded in communities, which could be our local community or neighborhood, or it could be a sports club of a sort where we contribute, and how having hobbies, things that we do for pure pleasure, are going to contribute to our long-term health, conditioning, and fitness. And today we're going to talk specifically about food and nutrition. YouTube Punk, thanks for dropping by. I'm glad to see you here. I hope you're doing all right. And I hope the weekend treated you well. It is Tuesday morning here. Yesterday was a day off in the Netherlands. So I am now doing the podcast and getting ready and to get ready to go to work. And I hope that you are well this evening, you and the family over in Texas. So, we'd usually talk about today's training, but we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about food specifically. And I think there are three things that we can take away about food that we need to consider seriously and be mindful of as a foundation for health and fitness. And I don't think my podcast is very sexy. I don't think the trainings are very sexy and appealing because they're very repetitive and very consistent. But it's a lot of the same. And the thing about health and fitness is that you want to do a lot of the same to get to a certain level of health and then stay there. And I think the habits and routine that we've built up over a lifetime contribute very much to where our health and fitness is right now. It is the accumulation of all of the little habits that you have around sleep, food, movement, friendships, mastery, that have led you to this place where we are today. And if that's a good place, that's great. This might not be the podcast for you. If there is room for improvement there in terms of your health markers, then maybe there's some things that we need to reconsider. And here's one of the things that we need to reconsider, and that is how we think about food. So where did we learn what we learned about food? Do you have any idea? It was probably certain elements of food choices and habits were passed down to you by your parents. And they were influenced by their parents, by the time they grew up in, by the marketing, and by their own knowledge and skills, knowledge about what good, wholesome, healthy food is, and skills in terms of how to prepare it. How else did you learn about food? Maybe you had friends who introduced you to certain foods. Maybe you are interested in certain sports. Maybe you got into fitness and some sort of bodybuilding training, and they explained to you that you need to eat a lot of protein to build muscle, and you need to eat clean food, so white rice and broccoli. Though that's a bit of a moot point nowadays. There's a lot of good information out there, but maybe that's what you learned, and you think that that is good food, and there's nothing wrong with that food, but it is quite limited in terms of its nutrition profile and its variety. And there's actually a lot to be said about understanding what variety means for our general health and fitness, not for that one specific goal of leaning out and building muscle. But where did we learn all of this? Did we learn from the guy in the gym? Did we learn from parents? Did we learn from marketing? Did we study food and nutrition science? Or did we just pick it up throughout life without really being conscious of it? And I think that last one is probably most frequently and most often the case. That's the one that we need to change, because it is relatively simple to learn a couple of basics about food and then translate that into different habits for our meals, 2 to 5 meals a day, or 2 meals and 2 snacks a day, or 2 meals, 3 meals and 2 snacks a day, or 3 meals and 1 snack a day, but anything between 2 and 5, to actually start seeing significant changes in our overall health. And I'm sure you did, and I'm sure that is actually a place where a lot of us pick up what we think food is, right? But if we learn at a young age that food is French fries and oven pizzas and greasy sandwiches and lots of mayonnaise and sauces, and when all we see in the movies and series is people at hamburger joints eating fries and hamburgers and drinking Coca-Cola, drinking sugary beverages, right? Then we start to think that that is a normal diet. But that is not what is going to keep us fit and healthy for living if we do that 3 times a day, all right? We need better strategies and better choices. So we need to unlearn whatever we think we know about food, and we want to start over with a fresh mind, with the sole purpose in mind of understanding what food is going to be and do for us for our long-term health and fitness, right? How can food help sustain us? How can it help us build energy, build strength, build endurance? How can it help us keep our body functioning well and healthily? And what are some of the changes that we are going to go through over the course of our lives? And how do we need to adapt our food strategies, right? Because there's a different food requirement between 0 and 2 years old, from 2 to 10 years old, from 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30, and so forth. And then from 60 to 70, and 70 to 80, and 80 to 90, there are physical changes. Our bodies change. Nobody's going to live to be 500 years old. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. The changes in our body offset some of the processes and things that worked up until that change occurs, right? So when our metabolism slows down when we reach a certain point, or when it becomes harder for us to process protein and synthesize that into muscle. What does that mean for the way we eat in terms of staying fit and healthy at a later age, with the risks of increased protein and the development of certain types of cancer, for example. So these are all things that we need to consider and understand. Every phase of life comes with different nutritional challenges. Okay. But what are some of the basics that we need to wrap our head around? Well, you've probably heard this and been knocked over the head to death with this, but it is absolutely true that in order for us to YouTube Punk McCloud, I knew there was a familiar ring to the way you typed out those messages in chat. Right? Energy balance is key for weight management. And weight management is key, for overall health and longevity. We don't necessarily need to lose weight, but we want to stay at a weight. We want to stay at a weight, and we want to have more lean mass and less fat mass. We would like to limit the amount of visceral fat, or get rid of the amount of visceral fat through diet and exercise, because visceral fat causes low-grade inflammation, and that is detrimental to our immediate and long-term health. Okay, so energy balance, understanding the concept of energy balance. As a person, there is so much energy that I use throughout the day. Simply sitting and resting and doing nothing consumes energy. Eating food gives me energy, but also consumes a bit of that energy to extract the energy from that food, to turn it into fuel for living. And within that equation, if I eat up to my energy requirement, my weight is going to stay the same. And that is what we want to have. Then there is an optimal weight for you as a person. And there is also a minimum requirement of calories to function well, right? And somewhere within that complex interplay between food intake, food matrices, quality types of food, amount of exercise, movement, activity, energy requirement throughout the day, which varies tremendously per person, but also not, and we'll talk about why not, is where you're going to find a way, need to find a way to eat certain foods that keep you satiated, keep you full, keep you satisfied, taste good, but that don't allow you to exceed that energy intake compared to what you expend in a day. Okay? That's why energy balance is so important. If we can maintain that together with a healthy sleep schedule and an hour of not even exercise, just movement, walking throughout the day, not even 60 minutes in one stretch, but like 4 times 15 minutes, you're going to see tremendous improvements in your general health and fitness already. Mel B, thanks for dropping by, saying hi. I hope you're doing well. Where you're at in the world, it's Tuesday morning. So on the podcast, we're talking about food and nutrition this morning. And I hope life is treating you well. And I hope you're off to a good end of the Monday or start of the Tuesday. And thanks for dropping by and your ongoing support. And I hope you're doing well with your health and fitness goals as well. The second thing that we need to think about when it comes to food and nutrition is that we want to eat varied, minimally processed foods, okay? So we want variation. Remember at the top that I talked about chicken, rice, and broccoli? right? And then it's salmon, rice, and broccoli. Well, we want variation. We want variation in the types of grains. I'd say, like, if you can stock up 3, 4 different types of grains, and you're doing brown rice one day, quinoa the next day, spelt the third day, and then pasta the fourth day, and you start that cycle over again. You're getting 4 different grains in with 4 different nutrition profiles. I think you're going to be doing pretty well overall in terms of types of carbohydrates. Maybe one of the days it's sweet potatoes, one of the days it's potatoes. There you have 6 already. You could improve on sleep. It's a good thing we talk about sleep regularly. And if you have any questions about sleep, you feel free to ask me. All right, I'd be happy to chat about that, specifically to a question you might have. Okay, so we have varied, minimally processed. So variation means also varying the types of meat that we might eat throughout the week. Can't eat steak 6 days a week or 7 days a week. Well, you can, but I wouldn't advise it, right? So if you have different types of meats and you alternate that with different types of fish, different types of plant-based sources of protein, you can get a very varied diet in. So what I try to do is I try to eat 2 different types of beans every day. So I take chickpeas and kidney beans, for example, or lentils and black beans, etc., etc. I try to eat white fish twice a week, so usually some sea bass and some cod, on and off. Or it's salmon and cod. That's not white fish, but eat salmon for the omega-3s and the healthy fats that are in there. And then there might be 1 day of chicken. And red meat, I've tried actually now to eliminate all processed red meat from my diet, and maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, a good steak as a part of the meal, so not even as the main part of the meal, not a huge chunk of steak, just like 80 grams of properly made steak, but very rarely. Also, the meat or fish is not the main part of the meal. It is a part of the meal that I'm consuming. So I've lessened the amount of that animal-based protein in favor of other more plant-based options in the mix. And I seem to be doing quite well with that. And that apparently is going to have some positive implications, according to the research I've read, for my long-term health and fitness. I have no idea how you say it. I say it my way. I think everyone says it differently, and I think there's a right way to say it. As long as we understand what we're talking about, I think we're A-okay and good, aren't we? So variety there. Variety in vegetables. Lots of different colors. Orange, red, green, purple, yellow. Whatever I can get my hands on. You see different colored tomatoes there as well. Mangoes, bananas, apples, strawberries in the fridge. Because as long as there are different colors, we get a lot of different polyphenols in. Apparently, that is healthy and good as well. So that variety matters. That's why we talk about varied. Minimally processed. It's very hard to find unprocessed food unless you're growing it yourself and taking it in from the land, right? So something in a can or in a jar is minimally processed. But what I'm trying to avoid is over-processed foods, highly processed, highly refined, ultra-processed foods with a lot of ingredients that I wouldn't generally have in my kitchen. Like I could make a healthier cupcake or muffin at home, right? Because usually they'll have some E numbers, which are some preservatives or some other flavor makers in them when I buy them in a store. So I don't get that addition in the version that I make at home. But then we run into the issue of maybe time or taste, my ability to create something with a certain texture, consistency point of sweetness is very different than the store-bought or the ones that the baker makes, for example. But just keep that in mind. But minimally processed, right? I can make things myself. If I can buy all those ingredients and mix things, that's usually minimally processed. Canned beans, canned fish, fish from a package, meat from the supermarket, usually minimally processed, all right, in variety, and get that in. And if we can get that into our system, that starts with our understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, our understanding of which types of food we need to buy, our understanding of our own level of skill in preparing those foods given the time we have. If something takes 3 hours to prepare and I only have 30 minutes to prepare it, doesn't matter how healthy it is, it's not going to end up on the table. But there are a lot of simple recipes that, the first time we make them, maybe we need to invest an hour, maybe 2 hours. But as we grow accustomed to those recipes, we can actually make them quicker and more effectively and efficiently. And that's exactly what we're after. So very minimally processed foods, but also developing the skill to actually then prepare and make them and investing the time in that. That's why if you have 7 to 14 recipes, you can include a lot of variety in your foods throughout the week, right? And then looking at varied minimally processed foods in terms of how they impact your energy balance, because it all stacks. Okay. The third thing that we need to unlearn and relearn is that food affects more than just weight. All right. Usually when we think of food, we think of dieting to lose weight, specifically to lose fat. Okay, sure. That is not untrue, but it's also not the whole truth, right? Food affects how well we feel, the type of energy we have. Oh, that sounds very tasty, homemade vegetarian chili. If you have a good recipe, go ahead and tell me where to find it. Right? Food affects our energy level, food affects how our body functions, foods affect, for someone like me, I'm lactose intolerant. If I eat milk, I'm not going to feel good throughout the day. For at least 4 to 6 hours, I'll feel terribly, terribly, terribly miserable. Okay? So we have a significant challenge there. Food affects more than just weight. Food affects our ability to recover from sports, our ability to synthesize muscle. If we are not eating enough protein, it is true, if we're not eating sufficient protein, our muscle mass is going to wither. So you want to understand how different types of food that we take in affect different health markers. If we eat foods high in saturated fat, that is going to be bad for our arteries and our cardiovascular health, no matter how many marathons we are able to run, right? Probably run better marathons because our cardiovascular system works better if we limit the intake of saturated fats in favor of unsaturated, mono and polyunsaturated fats. So there is a broader impact of food that we need to recognize, and we need to understand that the ingredients in ultra-processed and processed foods might not contribute to that long-term health goal that we are setting for ourselves. So that's why we need to unlearn what we think we know about food, and we need to start over. We need to start learning what our energy balance is. So at which amount of food do we gain weight? At which amount of food do we lose weight? At which amount of food do we stay more or less the same? We need to understand how we can incorporate more variety of minimally processed foods into our daily eating routine. I'd say on average you're going to eat between 27, right, and 41 times in a given week, food and drink. But for drinks, I would suggest water, coffee, and tea. It's try to skip everything else. If you want to have alcohol once in a while, well, we're all adults. I do it once in a while, but fully aware of the detrimental health impacts that it has on life, but it's also part of socializing. So I'm balancing things out there, right? We need to focus on understanding how the different foods that we are consuming are going to affect different health markers, and we need to get an understanding of those different health markers. How is our body weight developing? What is our fat to lean mass ratio? Do we have visceral fat? Do we need to do something about it? What does our blood work tell us about the potential risks for our cardiovascular health or for other health? Are we deficient or sufficient in certain types of vitamins and minerals? And understanding how food can help us actually, how's our gut microbiome doing? How is our digestive tract doing? Is everything functioning well? Do we feel satiated after meals for multiple hours, or do we get hungry every hour? You might be eating sufficient calories, but you might be eating calories from such different sources that after 30 minutes you want more food because your stomach doesn't understand that it's had enough energy because it hasn't been filled properly. All things to consider about food. You can get a lot of volume, very, very low calories in, and that's probably going to help you actually find that right energy balance and weight. So those are all the things that I would want you to consider as we think about what food, the impact food can have on our general health and fitness. I hope that was useful, and I hope that was interesting. And if you've been here watching, dropping by, thinking along, and making notes, let me know what you think. I truly appreciate that. You really help me out. I'm trying to hit 3,000 minutes of watch time on my channel. You can really help me out by going over to my channel, picking one video and just playing it start to end, or starting with podcast number 1 and listening through podcast 1 through 34. I think that would be a lot of watch time on my channel for sure. Even though you might find some of the topics a bit repetitive, but like I said, health and fitness is somewhat boring and repetitive because the basics of healthy living haven't changed that much in the last 60 or 70 years, despite what people would like you to believe and would like you to think with all of the hype videos and the rage bait content out there. Okay? I appreciate that, YouTube punk, and I can see the effect of it in my view stats actually. Remember that we're good just the way we are, but before we go into that, we're going to talk about one small change that we can make. So I would like you, when it comes to food, to try to find one item of ultra-processed food in your weekly routine, right? Find that one item and eliminate it from your weekly diet, okay, if you can. And I want you to understand that that might not be easy and you might not get it right in the first time, but try to find that one item of ultra-processed food that exists somewhere in your diet that you might be able to exchange for a less processed alternative and see what happens, okay? Let's see how difficult that is. Let's see the choices you have to make. Let's see how that impacts your grocery list, your ability to do the shopping, your joy of eating, how much we actually enjoy eating that food versus the alternative, and how long it might take for us to make that adjustment to a different type of food, because that learning is going to help inform you of the length of the process it's going to take to actually make lasting dietary changes for a longer, healthier life. All right? So find one item of ultra-processed foods, eliminate it from your diet with an alternative that is not or minimally processed and see what happens. And just try to make sure that the alternative is a healthy option, given your long-term health and fitness goals. Remember that we're good just the way we are. We've got to love ourselves before we can move on. It's the person we are today. It's going to get us to where we want to be tomorrow. You go, YouTube punk. I think one French fry a week will leave you without French fries in about 2 years. And I think that's a very realistic timeline for nutritional and dietary changes, actually. We're good just the way we are. We've got to love ourselves before we can move on. It's the person we are today. It's going to get us to where we want to be tomorrow. A bit of kindness is going to go a long way. There are enough people out there who want to put us down, so we lift ourselves up, all right, friends? And the only way to get anything done is by showing up and doing the work. Hit like, subscribe, watch a video on my channel. Mel B, YouTube Punk, thanks for dropping by. Be well today. And I will talk with you soon. And for everyone else who's watching, just remember to subscribe.